I want to share something that happened to me a few months ago, back when I was working at a mine in Sayas, New Mexico. If you've never heard of Sayas, I'm not surprised. It's basically the middle of nowhere. Just endless desert, jagged mountains, and a silence so heavy at night that it almost feels wrong, like the whole world is holding its breath. Out there, once the sun goes down, the dark isn't just dark, it's complete. Your headlights are the only thing keeping the world from disappearing entirely. The first time I encountered whatever this thing is, I was heading out to fuel one of the excavators. The trail leading to it was narrow and rough, and my service truck didn't throw a lot of light ahead of me. So I was driving slowly, eyes glued to the small patch of dirt road in front of me. Then, off in the direction of the mountains, a pair of eyes reflected at me. At first I brushed it off. We see coyotes all the time. Cows wander in too. But the second those eyes caught my attention, this cold wave of dread hit me. Not fear, dread. The kind that settles deep in your stomach before you even know why. And then I noticed something even worse. The desert was utterly silent. No crickets, no wind, nothing rustling in the brush. Just the low hum of my engine and the crunch of tires on dirt. Everything in me was telling me to turn around, but I didn't. I told myself I was being stupid, that it was just an animal. But the closer I got, the heavier that dread became, like something was waiting for me to get close enough. Finally, my headlights stretched far enough to hit the spot where I'd seen the eyes, and they were gone. Not moved, not fading into the brush, just gone. I stopped anyway. Against all logic, I got out to look. I don't even know why. Curiosity, fear, maybe I just needed to prove to myself that I wasn't imagining things. I walked out a little way, sweeping my flashlight over the dirt, and that's when I saw the tracks. At first they looked like oversized coyote prints, but the spacing between each step was way too long. And more importantly, there were only 2 prints at a time, side by side, not staggered like any 4-legged animal. Right then the silence broke, like someone flipped a switch. Crickets started buzzing again. Something darted across the brush. A distant howl echoed across the desert, and instead of calming me down, it somehow made everything feel worse, as if whatever had been standing there had slipped away the second I stepped out of the truck. I went back to work, forced myself to shrug it off, but I couldn't shake the image of those eyes, or those tracks. A few weeks later, I heard it again. This time I wasn't alone. I was servicing one of the crushers with one of my co-workers. I'll call him Jay. We're not supposed to be up there alone at night, so he was helping me blow out air filters and refill the diesel. While we were working, we heard this sound, whistling, coming from somewhere 50 to 80 feet away. Jay looked at me. "You hear that?" I nodded and told him it was probably the wind. We both went back to work, but 10 minutes later, it happened again. Only this time, the sound came from the opposite direction. Closer. Too close. Jay froze and whispered, "Dude, that's definitely not the wind." I swept my flashlight out into the desert but saw nothing, just pitch black emptiness. The whistling stopped. We decided to hurry and get the job done. But right as we started gathering our tools, we heard footsteps. Slow, heavy, not the kind of person who makes. These were deeper, deliberate, like something big was walking circles around the crusher. Jay kept glancing over his shoulder. I could hear his breathing start to shake. I wasn't doing much better. We were just about done when Jay suddenly screamed, "Get in the truck, now!" I didn't ask anything. I just ran. I hit the ground, sprinted to the truck, jumped in and started it, and right as the engine roared, something slammed into the side of the truck so hard that the rear passenger tires lifted off the ground. This was a fully loaded service truck, 25,000 pounds. There's no way a normal animal could hit it like that, not even a bull. Jay was yelling, "Go, go!" I floored it before the wheels even settled. I didn't look back. I didn't even breathe until we made it to the Connex. When we got out, we saw the damage. A massive dent was crushed into one of the back doors, and the hydraulic pump for the crane was smashed inward, like something had rammed it with incredible force. Jay was shaking. He looked sick. I asked him what he'd seen. He just stared at me for a second, then said, I don't know. It was huge, like really huge. It kinda looked like a coyote, but with a human torso, and these really, really long arms. A chill ran through me so fast I felt dizzy. All I could think about was those orange eyes I'd seen in the desert weeks earlier. Jay put in his 2 weeks the next morning. He didn't even finish them, just never came back. When he left, I decided I wasn't sticking around either. I put in my 2 weeks the same day. A few co-workers I still talk to say nothing strange has happened since we left. No eyes in the dark, no whistling, no footsteps. But the thing is, Sometimes I still think about those tracks. The silence fell over the desert like a blanket. The way the truck lifted off the ground was like it weighed nothing. And sometimes, late at night, I get this feeling. Like maybe that thing didn't stay at the mine. Like maybe it didn't want the mine at all. Maybe it wanted us. And I just hope whatever it is, it's not following either of us. People in my town still talk about him. Not often, but enough that you know the story isn't just some Halloween legend. They called him Punkinhead. And for a long time, I thought it was just one of those dumb stories kids passed around to scare each other. It wasn't. I learned that the hard way. I grew up in Milltown, Connecticut. It's not a prominent place, just old neighborhoods, old families, and a lot of old stories. But the oldest one, the one nobody ever tells lightly, is about a guy named Eugene Blatt. My dad used to say Eugene was born trouble. If something went missing, if something got vandalized, if someone's barn mysteriously burned down, everyone assumed it was him. By the time he was 16, he'd already gone from petty theft to breaking into houses, and even robbing a small bank. And when he finally got caught, trying to rob a jewelry store in broad daylight, nobody was surprised. He was thrown in Milltown Penitentiary, and from what my uncle, who worked corrections, told me, Eugene didn't last a week before he attacked another inmate. He was serving extra time for that when everything went sideways. Because on Halloween Eve, after 3 years locked up, Eugene Blatt escaped. The official report says he made it as far as the old cemetery on the hill behind the prison. Police dogs cornered him there. He tried to climb a tree, then jumped the massive iron fence surrounding the graveyard. But he slipped. Somehow, his head landed directly on one of those tall, spear-pointed fence spikes. It impaled him so profoundly that when his body fell, his head just stayed behind. According to people there that night, they heard the crack, heard the dog stop barking, heard an officer whisper, "Dear God?" But what they saw next, nobody believes unless they were there. My uncle told me this part in a shaking voice he never used for anything else. Eugene's headless body stood up, like it was confused, like it was still alive. It staggered around until it found his head stuck on the spike. Then it twisted it free, tucked it under its arm, and sprinted into the fog towards a pumpkin patch behind the cemetery. They searched for days. They never found him. Not his body, not his head, nothing. For years, that was the end of the story. But I'm telling you this, because I was there when the rest of it happened. It was exactly 1 year later, Halloween. I was helping an older neighbor, Mr. Gallagher, bring his dog back from a walk. He lived next to that same pumpkin field Eugene ran into during his escape. We were talking about usual stuff, weather, winter coming early, that kind of thing. Then the dog stopped, just froze, staring into the pumpkin patch. "What's wrong with him?" I asked. Mr. Gallagher squinted into the field. "Probably a deer," he said, but the dog started whining, backing up, tail tucked so hard it was practically glued to his belly. That's when we noticed it, among all the regular pumpkins. There was this one massive warped thing, almost like two pumpkins melted together, and it had a face. Not carved, not drawn, grown, and the face, God, it looked just like the mugshot of Eugene Blatt. The same slanted eyes, the same crooked nose, the same nasty little grin he always had. Only this grin was moving. The eyelids were blinking. Slow. Sticky. Like they were struggling to open. I felt my legs lock up, like my body knew I should run but couldn't. Then it growled. A deep, angry rumble that shook the inside of my chest. Mr. Gallagher grabbed my arm and screamed for me to run. We called the police, and to their credit, they actually came right away. I wasn't expecting them to believe us, but they did, because the moment they got close to that pumpkin, it moved, its expression shifted, eyes narrowing, mouth opening like it was about to speak. One of the officers shouted for backup. Another radioed the sheriff. Someone else, one of the farmhands, showed up with a shovel. He said the pumpkin must have grown on a root and offered to dig it up. That's when everything started falling apart. The vine running from the bottom of the pumpkin wasn't a normal root. It was thick, flesh-colored, veiny. The deeper they dug, the more wrong everything felt. 6 feet down, they found a body, a human body, Eugene's body. Still warm, still pink, still connected to the pumpkin as it had grown out of him. Someone panicked and pulled out a knife to cut the vine. I'm not sure who yelled, "Don't," but it was too late. The moment the blade touched that root, the pumpkin let out a screech. Not a scream, not a moan, a full-on animal howl that made everyone recoil. Then it started vomiting. I'm not exaggerating. It shot out a stream of rotten pumpkin guts mixed with stuff that looked disturbingly human, pink folds, gray mush, seeds. People were screaming. The officers were trying to drag each other back. One guy fell and slipped in the mess. Then came the blood. The body in the ground started convulsing, jerking like someone flipping a switch on an electric chair. And then, everything went silent. For a split second, it was like the world held its breath. That's when both the pumpkin and Eugene's body exploded. A complete concussive blast that knocked people off their feet and coated the entire crowd in a thick layer of gore, blood, seeds, brain matter, bone fragments, everything that thing had been filled with. I tasted dirt and iron and something bitter I still try to forget. Most of the officers quit after that night. Some left town altogether. As for me, I don't walk near that field anymore. Nobody does. Pumpkins still grow there, but every fall, someone swears they see one with a grin, blinking, watching, waiting, and every Halloween, I can't shake the feeling that the story of Punkinhead isn't over. What I'm about to tell you is entirely accurate, and even now, years later, I still don't have an explanation for what happened. Back in 2017, my twin sister, who I'll call O, and I had just moved with our mom to Tennessee. The property we lived on was what's called a century farm. 160 acres of open land, surrounded by trees, hills, and old history. There was even a cemetery on the property, an older one tucked into the woods, and the house itself had been built in the 1800s. It was beautiful, don't get me wrong, but it had that old energy to it, the kind you feel in your bones the moment you walk inside. This happened during winter. Snow covered everything, and our house sat in a hollow, so the hills made it perfect for sledding. Our friend, whom I'll call B, came over one evening for a sleepover. We were all around 14, none of us could drive yet, so once the snowstorm hit, she was basically stuck with us for the night. We spent hours playing outside in the snow until it got dark. Then we came in, thawed out, and started our usual sleepover routine. Movies, games, just talking about random teenager stuff. The house was always creaky, always cold in certain corners, but we were used to it. It's important to know that the room I stayed in had a door that opened directly into the living room. I was in my room that night, sitting on my bed with the door slightly open, while B and O were out in the living room getting ready to sleep. Around 10:30, I heard the door push open. I looked up and saw B walk in. She didn't say anything at first. She just walked straight over to my bed and started rummaging through my blankets. It looked like she was searching for me. I sat up and asked, "Hey, what's up? Are you okay?" She finally looked at me and said she needed to go to the bathroom, but was too scared to get up alone. I didn't question it. The house was old and creepy, and the hall felt like a completely different temperature at night. I totally understood. I got up, walked ahead of her, and stepped into the bathroom to turn the light on. When I turned around to tell her she could come in, she was gone. The hallway behind me was empty, silent. I called her name, thinking maybe she'd walked away and I somehow didn't hear her, but there was nothing. I checked the living room. Both B and O were sound asleep, like fully asleep, breathing slowly, face relaxed, not pretend, not half awake. I shook them both awake immediately, demanding to know what kind of prank they were trying to pull, but they just stared at me, confused and groggy. B doesn't sleepwalk. At worst, she talks in her sleep, but she does not get up, walk around, or engage in conversation. My sister believed me instantly. B looked terrified once she understood what I was saying, but we all agreed not to talk about it outside our little group. I told myself it was exhaustion, or the storm, or just my imagination, but a small part of me knew better. The next morning I told my mom. She's very religious and has had her own experiences, so she didn't doubt me for a second. She said the house had history, and that she'd start blessing it regularly, and she did. Life went on, months passed, and I almost let myself forget about that night. Then something happened that brought everything back. A friend of mine, let's call her S, came to stay over. I hadn't told her anything about what happened with B. I didn't want to freak her out. We went to bed like normal. Nothing strange happened that night, no weird noises, no shadows, nothing. But the next morning, she told me something that made my blood run cold. She said, "You asked me to go to the bathroom with you last night. You said you were scared." I just stared at her, because I hadn't asked her that. I hadn't gotten out of bed. I hadn't even woken up, but she described it the same way I had described B. The same tone, the same words, the same situation, except this time, it was me she saw, or something that looked and sounded exactly like me. I didn't know what to say. I didn't know how to explain it without sounding insane. The only thing I knew was that whatever happened to be, had happened again. My mom blessed the house more often after that, and after a while, things calmed down. We never saw anything again, never heard anything. It was like the house just settled. Still, I never forgot it. Even now, I'm in my 20s, living in my own home, and I still bless my place regularly. Part of it is habit, part of it is superstition. But the most significant part is that I genuinely don't know what we were dealing with back then. I've researched doppelgangers, spirits, residual energy, everything. Nothing fully matches. All I know is that something in that house wanted to be me, or wanted to be one of us, and it only came out at night when the halls were cold, and the house was quiet, and everyone else was asleep. I've never experienced anything like it since, and honestly, I hope I never do.